Poisoning is a cowardly way to kill, but that didn't stop the ancients from doing it whenever they needed to get rid of someone. But what were the deadliest ancient poisons, and which could kill everyone alive today? Here's the top 10. Number 10. Mandrake. Mandrake is the root of the mandragora plants found in the Mediterranean region, and these roots, as well as the leaves of the plant, contain poisonous tropane alkaloids. The effects of this poison were well known to people in the ancient world. In the proper dose, it renders a patient unconscious, so it was used as a primitive form of anesthetic. But it can also cause vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, increased heart rate, blurred vision, dryness of the mouth, and difficulty in urinating. Larger doses result in delirium and madness, and because the roots often look like miniature people, it was commonly used in witchcraft and pagan rituals. Theophrastus, a Greek philosopher and naturalist, explained that to harvest a mandrake root, you should first draw 3 circles around it using a sword and then cut it facing west. If you want to harvest some more, you then need to dance around it, talking as lewdly about sex as you can while you do it. Mandrake was never practical as a poison for murders or assassinations, but in large enough quantities it can be deadly. To kill the entire population of the planet today, you would need about 40,000 tons of it. With a bit less, you could also send everyone crazy, but you'd have to spend a lot of time dancing around in circles and talking about sex before you could harvest anywhere near enough to achieve this. Number 9. Opium. Nowadays, modern synthetic opioids are far more potent than the original version given to us by nature, and only about 12 tons of fentanyl would be enough to kill the entire human race. In ancient times, though, they didn't have fentanyl, but they certainly knew about opium. It may have been used as long as 7,000 years ago and was being actively collected from at least 3,400 BCE. The ancient Sumerians called it the joy plant, and it was cultivated by the Assyrians, Babylonians, and the Egyptians before production also began in Europe. You might not think of opium as a poison. Most people see it simply as a highly addictive narcotic drug. But it's possible to die of an overdose, especially when opium is used with other drugs or poisons. For example, opium was used with hemlock as a quick and painless way to put someone to death, and the same mixture was used in ancient Greece as a form of suicide. There's also a theory that Queen Cleopatra actually used a combination of hemlock, wolfsbane, and opium rather than the bite of an asp to end her life. I have some bad news, I'm afraid. They're going to take you to Rome and parade you through the streets in triumph.
No, never. I'd rather die. Where's that asp?
What's an asp?
It's a poisonous snake, you idiot. Keep up.
Oh, right, okay, I've got one here.
Actually, got any hemlock, opium, and wolfsbane?
Sure, I always carry a bottle with me, just in case. Here you go. If you wanted to kill everyone on Earth just with opium, you'd need about 16,000 tons of it. But if you had that much opium, you could also sell it for approximately $16 billion, which would make you one of the wealthiest people on the planet. So maybe that would be a better idea. Granted, selling that much opium would be the biggest drug deal in history and would be totally illegal, but it's still a better idea than using it to administer an overdose to everyone currently alive. Number 8. Lead. Lead was commonly used in the ancient world. For example, the Romans used it for pipes. The word plumbing comes from plumbum, the Latin word for lead, and they also used it for pots and even for sweetening wine. Lead pipes were still common well into the 20th century, and although they're not used in modern construction, they still exist in many older buildings around the world. The problem with all this is that lead is poisonous. Unlike most of the other poisons on this list, it doesn't normally kill you outright, but instead causes more chronic health issues. Those with lead poisoning can suffer from abdominal pains, and they also suffer from dark, negative, and gloomy moods. In the Middle Ages, lead continued to be added to wine, and during the Industrial Revolution, workers were exposed to lead fumes which were even more toxic, and this led to health issues and mental disorders. Lead can also reduce IQ, and it's thought that more than half of the population of the US has a slightly lower IQ that they would otherwise have had due to inhaling the fumes from leaded gasoline. It is possible to die from acute lead poisoning, and an average-sized person would need to consume about 28 grams of it for the dose to prove fatal. This means you would need about 224,000 tons of lead to kill the world's entire population. Although, you could also use that much lead to make 30 billion bullets, which would probably be a more efficient way to use your lead if wiping out humanity was your goal. Number 7. Arsenic. Known as the king of poisons and the poison of kings due to its use in royal assassinations. It's also known as inheritance powder during the Renaissance because it was frequently used for bumping off family members. Arsenic has long been among the poisoners' weapons of choice. It's a chemical element that occurs naturally in minerals and sometimes also as a pure crystal, and it has been used as a poison at least since classical times. In higher doses, it causes vomiting and agonizing abdominal pains along with watery diarrhea containing blood. However, when given in smaller doses, it causes chronic health issues such as the thickening and darkening of the skin, diarrhea, abdominal pains, heart disease, and cancer. When someone is poisoned with arsenic, the effects are similar to those of food poisoning, so in the ancient world, when someone died, it was often hard to attribute it to a deliberate murder, which is one of the reasons for its popularity. The lethal dose for a single human being is around 1,050 micrograms, so 8,400 tons of arsenic would be enough to kill everyone alive. And it wouldn't be a nice way for all of us to go either. Number 5. Belladonna, aka deadly nightshade. Belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, is a poisonous plant that's native to much of Europe and Western Asia. Like mandrake, it contains toxic tropane alkaloids, making the leaves and berries extremely poisonous. The plant is known as belladonna, Italian for beautiful woman, because its juice was an ingredient in eye drops that were used to dilate the pupils and make eyes look more seductive. Before modern anesthetic, it was also used with opium for operations. It was used as a poison at least as long ago as Roman times, and it's possible that it was used to kill the first Roman emperor Augustus. Death by belladonna poisoning is extremely unpleasant, and before you expire, you can experience symptoms that include sensitivity to light, blurred vision, loss of balance, headache, severe dry mouth and throat, slurred speech, difficulty in urinating, constipation, confusion, hallucinations, delirium, and convulsions. Only a small amount of belladonna can prove fatal, and you can die from eating just a few of the berries. If you had 5,600 tons of it, that would be enough to kill everyone on the planet, and in a fairly unpleasant way too. Number 4. Hemlock. When you were small, your mother may have told you to eat your carrots up because they make you see in the dark. But another plant in the same family as carrots, hemlock, is best avoided because it's extremely poisonous. The seeds and roots are especially toxic, and eating the stem even 3 years after the plant has died can kill you. If you consume a lethal dose, the toxins will cause a respiratory collapse, and it will also cause serious damage to your kidneys. However, the plant also has narcotic effects that may cause you to fall asleep before expiring, so dying from hemlock is not as agonizing a death as some of the others on this list. For this reason, hemlock was used as a relatively humane form of execution in ancient Greece. The most famous victim of this poison was Socrates, who, after being sentenced to death, chose to drink a hemlock infusion as his manner of execution.
Okay, Socrates, you're guilty, so you get to choose how you go.
What have you got?
We can cut your head off.
Sounds messy.
Hanging?
No, don't fancy that.
Pushed off a cliff?
Not my style.
That's all we got, I'm afraid. You have to choose one. Oh wait, how about this? Hemlock potion. Want to try that?
Oh, go on then. Sign me up for that one. With a bit of honey and a dash of lemon too. Is that okay? And can I have some olives with it too?
No problem. Got it. I'll see what I can do.
Cheers, bud. To kill everyone alive, you'd need slightly less of this than if you were using belladonna. Only about 4,480 tons would do the job. And it would be a lot less painful for everyone if you choose this poison, so this might be a good choice if you want to kill everyone in the nicest way possible. Number 3. Cyanide. Cyanide is an incredibly toxic compound that occurs in nature. For example, it can be found in the seeds and stones of fruits such as apricots, apples, and peaches. Cyanide comes in several forms, including as a gas, and exposure quickly leads to symptoms including headache, dizziness, increased heart rate, shortness of breath, and vomiting. If the person has received a lethal dose, this will quickly be followed by seizures, loss of consciousness, and cardiac arrest. It was used in ancient times as a poison, and it was said to be one of Emperor Nero's favorite means of disposing family members. He even had his own dedicated personal poisoner called Locusta, who killed his brother Britannicus for him using cyanide. It has also been used in more recent times, and was one component of the gas used in some Nazi gas chambers. Rommel, Himmler, Göring, and Hitler's wife Eva Braun all used cyanide for suicide. Hitler himself also bit into a cyanide capsule, but then he shot himself in the head at the same time just to make sure. If you consume even a small amount of cyanide, you will be dead within minutes. And if you had 1,120 tons of this stuff, it would be enough to do for everyone currently alive. Number 2. Strychnine. Everyone's heard of cyanide, but something that's a bit less famous is strychnine. But this is an even more potent and far more unpleasant poison. It's found in the plant known as Strychnos nux vomica, and was known in ancient India as well as in Rome, and it was sometimes used for executions and political killings. When Cleopatra was choosing the best way to commit suicide, she experimented with various poisons on criminals to see the effects. And very understandably, she decided not to use strychnine because it produces arguably the most excruciating death of any poison on the list. Symptoms start with muscle spasms. This is then followed by seizures, cramping, stiffness, hypervigilance, and agitation. Your eyes may start to protrude from their sockets, and you may suffer from metabolic and respiratory acidosis as well as kidney failure. If the dose is not enough to kill you, these symptoms may persist for up to 24 hours before you start to recover. But with a high enough dose, you will die from either cardiac arrest, respiratory failure, multiple organ failure, or brain damage, or maybe a combination of all of them. With only 560 tons of this stuff, you could kill everyone on Earth. But please don't, because it's really a terrible way to go. Number 1. Aconite, aka wolfsbane, aka monk's hood, aka devil's helmet. Aconite, also known as monk's hood due to the shape of its deceptively pretty flowers, is a deadly poison. Another of its names, devil's helmet, is perhaps more apt due to its extreme toxicity. If you ingest as little as 2 micrograms of this stuff, you'd better have prepared your will because you're not going to be around for much longer. Another of this poison's names is wolfsbane, and this is because it was used to poison arrow tips or bait to kill wolves. It was also used to tip arrows by the ancient Greeks and may have been used to murder Alexander the Great. It was employed both for hunting and in war in China, and has similarly been used for hunting by various peoples around the world. If you're poisoned with aconite, the first signs will be diarrhea, nausea, and vomiting, and this will be accompanied by a burning or tingling around the mouth and face, and a burning feeling in the stomach. You'll probably start to sweat, you'll feel dizzy and confused, you'll have trouble breathing, and you'll develop a stinker of a headache. And then, if you've been given a lethal dose, your heart will stop beating. Or you'll simply stop breathing, and that will be the end of you. The amount required to kill you is roughly the same as for strychnine, so 560 tons of this would be enough to finish every human alive. So, those are the ancient poisons that could kill the whole world and how much of each would be needed to do it. But which one has been responsible for the most deaths in history? Actually, it's none of these. The ancient poison responsible for killing the most people is alcohol. People have been drinking alcohol since the Stone Age, and we've been brewing it since at least 13,000 years ago. Most people probably don't think of it as a poison, or even as a drug, but it definitely qualifies as both. It's thought that around 3 million people around the world die from alcohol-related causes each year. So you could say that a glass of booze is actually the most deadly of all ancient poisons. And that is a sobering thought.